Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and this week we had the unfortunate shooting, massacre, act of terrorism that occurred in the Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Dylann Roof was arrested for killing, from what I understand, 9 people, 6 women, 3 men, in the church while they were praying. And I got a call from a brother that I have a lot of respect for, and I really wanted to hear what he had to say. Mr. Ken Williams. He's a former police detective with the Brockton Police Force in Massachusetts. He's also the head of Cable Services and Associates, which investigates wrongful death situations. So I want to ask my brother, how you doing today, man?
How you doing, doctor? Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Glad you're here. Now, so a lot of emotion has been kind of going through all of us as we saw this happen. This act of extreme cowardice, hate. There are so many other things I could say about it, but I won't. I'll let you do all the talking. Uh, okay, so tell me, what made you reach out and want to express your thoughts? I mean, typically when you and I talk, we'll talk about issues that relate to police brutality and things like that. But I was surprised to hear from you on this. So what's on your mind about this? What do you want to talk about?
Some of my concerns were, by us only looking at this as a hate crime, we actually water down the fact that this was an act of terrorism.
Mm,
I'm in the Boston area. Um, we had two brothers that went out and committed heinous acts against innocent people, and that in itself was considered an act of terrorism, right? Whenever a person takes it upon themselves to enter a church where people are innocent, they're worshiping God, and commits an act of hate after sitting around for an hour, we have to go and start thinking about um, what is the motivation. And one of the things that concerned me when this report came out, I want to extend my condolences to the families, of course. And we also have to thank law enforcement for reacting and locking this guy up. But we have to go a step further. We have to ask, you know, when we think about terrorism, we have to go and parse that out for a second. We had a gentleman that was the reverend of this church, but he's also a state senator. In April of this year, he had passed or was instrumental in a bill going forward that was going to put body cameras on 100% of the police officers in the state of South Carolina. Um, is there a connection between the person who walked in that church after driving so many hours, miles from his residence on a specific day? Is there a connection between his act and that type of legislative act that had taken place to make things safer for Black people in the state of South Carolina?
mm.
That's something that I think we need to go and have a discussion about, because if everyone sits back and says, okay, this was an act of hate, and we do not explore the fact that this could be connected to an act of terrorism from a political preview, we're going to miss a bigger picture here. So that's the reason why I think it was imperative that we talk.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that issue because I was asked by CNN today if I thought that it was an act of terrorism, and to me it was a very simple answer. I just went back to the definition of the word, and if you look up the definition, it says that the use of violence and intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. I definitely saw this, his sort of interest in sort of dealing with black people, uh, and dealing with the fact that we're taking over, whatever that means, whatever he thinks that means. I couldn't help but to see that. I mean, it's terrorism. I don't see why someone would define it as anything other than terrorism. Now, I've also had people say that this was not racial. This was, maybe it was anti-Christian or something like that, or just senseless violence, but it wasn't racial. What do you think about that when you're sort of hearing all these different theories as to why this incident took place?
Well, I mean, what came out his mouth, to the people who survived this attack, he defined it as being racial. He placed race in his speech, which clearly defined his intent and what his purposes were. Um, I don't want to see law enforcement pack it up and say, okay, everyone's content with this being a hate crime, and they don't do the things that are necessary to ferret out the terrorism part. In order to ferret out the terrorism, you got to do a search warrant to gain access to his computers that he may have at his residence. You have to interview his family members and friends who he may have had close contact and ties with on social media, and ferret out whether or not there are other people who think or are like minded as he is, who are willing to go out and carry out these types of violence, these acts of violence. In order to go and thwart that, we have to take it a step further and realize that he received a handgun in the month of April from a family member. Uh, you know, that handgun being passed on to him, from what I understand, he had a prior arrest for possession of a drug substance. Not sure if that adjudicated itself, but clearly, I believe because of that arrest, he could not possess a handgun in the state of South Carolina. So these are questions that need to be answered. Um, at the same time, we have to also look at the fact that, if he does have ties to people on social media, and that becomes a network of people, of like-minded people, did anyone encourage him, support him, and help him get to that church with information of individuals inside that church? These are things that an investigation must disclose to us.
Well, just so people know, in the shooting, four pastors were killed. I mean, one that you mentioned earlier, Democratic State Senator Clementa Pinckney, that's his name. Also, what was so interesting about this shooting was that he, if you have an issue with, I think he mentioned black people raping everybody and taking over and all these other things, and it's so interesting that he went to a church, the most peaceful, nonviolent place you could be, and killed six women. The majority of his victims were women, and I'm sorry, but for me, I feel a little more sensitive to the fact that he killed women as opposed to men. That he killed church goers as opposed to, say, people that had armed themselves, or people that that could somehow be considered threats. Not that any of that would be justified, but the fact that you wouldn't kill six women in a church, that's just that's beyond me. I mean, it baffles me. I guess he was going for the softest target. And I'm wondering, I wonder. So what if he was just there because he wanted to hurt black people? Let's say there wasn't anything. He didn't even know that there was a senator in the church, because Senator Pinckney happened to be a pastor of the church as well. So, is it possible that he just said, I want to pick a black church and just go and do something horrible in a black church? Was there any reason you think that he picked that specific church, other than the political theories you mentioned? Because from what I understand, I didn't see any other people there who were politically engaged. I saw everyone there who was black and at church praying. That's the consistent theme I see. What do you think about that?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, for a person to drive from, I believe he's from the area of Columbia, South Carolina, to Charleston, South Carolina, that's not a block away or 2 blocks away. That was a drive. That took some, that took some gas, that took some planning to get down the road, and also to go there on the night that he obviously had to research that there was Bible study. He may have researched who the reverend was. That the state senator Pinckney was the reverend there. So that's the reason why I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
law enforcement should be trying to bridge these gaps so that speculation leaves the room and we know exactly what the motive was here, because that's very, very important. I mean, in terms of violence under the act, under the name of God, I mean, we got to go back and we got to think about. I believe it was around 1562. Sir John Hawkins from England sailed in the good ship Jesus, and was the first slave trade merchant to hit the Horn of Africa. So acts of violence in the name of God or Jesus have been going on for quite some time. Acts of violence directed towards black people have been going on for some time. But in this particular instance, when we have a man that goes into a church, sits there, and for an hour um, deliberates on how he wants to go and kill people with his intent, that's pretty sick. Now, is he twisted? I don't know. But he seems to have his faculties together enough to go in there and want to, possess a gun, brandish a gun, point a gun, fire a gun, and then direct several people that he's not going to kill them because he wants them to carry forward what his intent was. So that means to me that there was some deliberate planning. This was a planned operation, and we shouldn't be so quick to label him as just twisted because then that gives him an out.
Mm. Wow. Well, I think it doesn't just give him an out; it gives everyone an out, right? It gives the whole country an out in terms of dealing with the long history of racial abuse that we've endured. I mean, here this church, back in 1816, they had members of the church that were hanged for resisting slavery, for educating themselves, things like that. And here it is, 200 years later, and you're still getting this same thing. In fact, the church was established by Denmark Vesey, who was eventually killed for leading a slave or planning a slave revolt. You're right. I mean, there's a lot of investigation to do to wonder how much of that history did he know? Why did he pick that particular church? And that part about him driving, I read a lot about this kid, but I did not know that part right there, and that does make me think. So, you know what? Now that you've explained yourself, and now I understand why you wanted to talk about this. You are a detective, and as a detective, that's what you're good at. You're good at asking the questions that a lot of people may not ask. So, I look forward to hearing more of your analysis about this as we try to figure out, what's going on, and most importantly, figure out how to stop this, because this is just kind of opening a scary chapter to me in national politics. I haven't really seen this kind of environment in the U.S. in a while. Do you think this is my last question for you? Do you think that there is a difference right now between where we are politically and socially as far as race relations? Do you think there's a difference now versus any point in the last, say, 25 years? Has there been any point where the tensions maybe been this high, the division been this great? What do you think?
I mean, there's a report out there that says that more than 50% of white people don't see racism, don't see discrimination. And I'm going to guess that back in the 60s, maybe 90% of the folks or 100% of the folks out there nearly didn't see discrimination or racism. So, as a statistic, are we moving in the right direction? Maybe. But in terms of loss of life, we've got to deal with this problem of racism, white supremacy. We've got to treat it as it is. It's a terrorist type of organization. It's a cancerous type of environment, mental thought process that only looks at color and somehow, in the name of God, thinks it's operating in a proper capacity, and it's not. It's creating, it's trying to create fear. It's trying to chill the speech of black people. That's the reason why I'm saying Senator Pinckney needs to be elevated for his work to bring about those body cameras to try to go and bring about safety for all people of all different walks of life, not just black people. But at the same time, if this was a politically motivated attack, we need to go and have it elevated to a terrorist type of attack and have this young man charged accordingly. And the federal government should be at his house going through everything that he has with a search warrant to make sure that if there are any other people out there that are Confederates of his, that they too are brought to justice, because that's exactly what the black community needs right now. It needs to know that the federal government is working for it to make sure that we are safe and secure, just like white people are.
What about his father? Should his father go to prison for giving him that gun?
Um, the law in South Carolina changed in April, where before April you had to have a permit. The law changed in April, where they voted to eliminate the permit option. So the question becomes: was the father possibly responsible civilly, maybe, for giving his son a gun when he knew his son had a prior arrest, possibly? Um, did other family members who understood that he should not possess that gun and turned a blind eye to it, are they responsible? Those are things civilly that could hold people responsible ultimately for these type of acts. But I'm not sure about criminally, because the law in South Carolina changed.
Well, and the laws have always just so worked in our favor. Um, okay, well, thank you, Ken. This has been really insightful and excellent information, and I look forward to hearing more from you on this. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Doctor.
Absolutely. And everybody, thank you for watching. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and this is Mr. Ken Williams. His website is kwillservices.com. He does a lot of testimony and supports people in wrongful death lawsuits. He's also a former 20-year police veteran with the Brockton Police Department, a former detective as well. So his insight is certainly appreciated. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.